Welcome everybody to the American Space Museum, where for the last 20 years our parent foundation, the U.S. Space Walk of Fame, has been preserving the birth of the American space age and igniting the future in, hopefully, young space workers. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're so glad you're here with us today. You see we have a special guest, Randall Clay. Welcome, Randall. He is a real space worker that we love and our museum represents, working on the ARTEMIS program. He's had a 20-year career so far.
32.
32?
32.
Oh, okay, 32. And with that, we welcome you, Randall, here. We can see we're going to have a good time. Appreciate you coming and spending your time with us, staying curious.
All right.
Tuesday, we had Ellen Brown with us, and she said you guys have offices beside each other.
Next door.
So we're going to enjoy talking to Randall about his career. He's working on the ARTEMIS project right now. But let's get a little background from our new museum friend here. Randall, you grew up in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas.
And ended up here in the sand of the Space Coast.
Yes.
You have on your alma mater, where you got your bachelor's degree in engineering. Tell us where that's from.
Yeah, that's from Prairie View A&M University. It's a HBCU, which is stands for Historical Black Colleges and Universities.
Okay.
It is actually the second oldest state university in Texas.
And what town's that in?
It's in Prairie View, Texas.
Oh, Prairie View, Texas. Oh,
Yeah, about 50 miles outside of Houston.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Actually, I actually lived in Conroe, Texas for
Not far.
Mark's wild years back in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, I was caught in the last recession out there.
Okay. Yeah.
And have a sister that lives in San Angelo. So I love Texas, visited often.
Okay.
And Dallas is an awesome place to be from. One of my favorite, I tell people you should be on your bucket list, is the Frontiers of Flight Museum at Love Field.
Yes.
Is a cool place to be.
Yeah.
And of course, being a baby boomer, the assassination Daily Plaza of President Kennedy is always cool.
Yeah.
Not cool to see, but something else. So you got your MBA in science at the University of Miami, right?
Yeah, I got an MBA in management, and I got a Master of Science in Engineering Technology, Management of Technology, if you will, which is basically a management degree that focuses on technical sciences and managing technical processes.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about growing up in Texas and watching all those Roger Staubach football films of his great career for the Cowboys. Where did you get the bug that you were going to work in the space industry?
Okay, so I'm definitely a big Cowboys fan to start with.
Yes.
But growing up, I was always curious. You know, I had a big curiosity, and that sometimes led to some disciplinary action, if you will, by me being so curious. I remember as a young kid, I wanted to know how electricity worked. You know, and I had no idea, but I know if you plug something in there, you get a reaction. So I'd take, radios apart and put them back together, and I'd go a little bit further until, a couple of times I wasn't able to get them back to working like they were supposed to. And so that warranted the appropriate reaction there from the parents. But I grew up in a very loving home, and my mom and my dad, they encouraged us to be whatever we wanted to be. I always knew I wanted to do something technical. Growing up, I didn't know a lot about engineering per se, but computers was a big thing in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. That was going to be, a career in the computers. I actually graduated high school a little early. I went to South Oak Cliff High School. Little tidbit, myself and as a freshman, Dennis Rodman was a basketball player.
Oh, really?
Was a senior at my freshman year.
Okay.
But
were you on the team?
No, actually, I wasn't.
He's a tall gentleman, by the way.
Actually, he didn't even make it on the team his senior year.
Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, we had a pretty competitive school there, so no, I didn't make the team.
Curious about what careers your parents have to be such role models for you.
So very interesting. I grew up in a very interesting household. My mom was, my dad he's a good man, but my mom was really the anchor of the house. She was a nurse. And still a nurse, still practicing somewhat. She's in her 70s now, but she's still working every day. My dad was a professional musician, And when I say professional musician, I mean, you know, the kind that traveled on the road. He worked with Ray Charles' band from 62 to
what instrument
77. Tenor sax.
Oh,
yeah. So he stayed on the road a lot, you know, so because they traveled all the time. They came home a couple of times a year, may have spent about a month or so at home. And a lot of people would probably think that would be a problem with the father not being in the house, but it really wasn't, because, you know, at the time I grew up in my neighborhood, in the community, you know, I had my grandparents, I had uncles, I had, you know, the neighbors, you know, across the street, you know, that were role models that were there. So anything you ever needed, you know, from that aspect, it was filled by the community. Mm-hmm. So that was a real good opportunity there. And my dad, by being a musician, he brought a very different perspective into the house, you know, because he was a free thinker. He was open, you know, he was just a free spirit, where Mom was more focused on, you know, she was the disciplinarian, if you will. And so she made sure that everybody stayed on task. There was no, you know, as they say in our industry, there was no failure. You know, there was no, I can't do it or I won't do it. It was, you will make good grades, you will go to class every day, you know, you will do the things that you need to do to be successul. So that's the kind of household that I grew up in.
Two kind of universes. Dad's out there playing Charlie Parker, and Mom's saving at the hospital, you know, working with patients. That's very interesting.
So it's very dynamic. So I had the option, you know, to kind of go and do pretty much whatever I wanted to do. And music was something I kind of thought about, but I just never had a real interest in it. And I think probably because I saw how much my dad was gone, and I always said when I grew up, I wouldn't want to be away from my family that much. So I focused on something a little more stable, if you will. And I narrowed in on engineering. I actually had a job in high school as a janitor. I graduated a little early, so I needed a little job. I was going to community college, and I was working at at this big building, and it was in the evenings, and it was an engineering firm there called Lockwood Green. It was an engineering architecture firm. And there was a couple of guys, young guys, they would be there late at night, you know, at the drafting tables doing all the drawing. And I'm in there bumping the trash cans, emptying the trash. And so I'd ask them a couple of questions, and we'd talk about the careers and different things that they were doing. Actually, both of them graduated from Texas A&M. And that sparked the interest because I was planning on going to college that next semester in the fall. And so when I did finally apply for the colleges, I applied, and then I applied for engineering programs, and I ended up going to Prairie View A&M.
So you've got a very responsible job. You've been involved, like you said, 3 decades here. He is a senior manager for the Jacobs Project Management Group, and but you're working on the ARTEMIS program, and we'll get to how you got there. I just kind of wanted to jump ahead a little bit to let everybody know that this man is working on us going back to the moon, and whatever segment of it that you're involved in. But what I find people, and we've talked about this before, NASA hires the contractors to spend the government money on our projects. It's like NASA's the homeowner, and they're hiring the plumber, the yard guy, and all this sort of thing. So all of this is under this umbrella called the test, and I got to look at my notes here, the Test Operations Support Contract.
Yes, TOSC.
So everybody working out there as a contractor is under the TOSC contract, basically, right?
Well, that's one of many contracts. So it's probably about 4 or 5 major contracts that are out there right now. Our specific contract is supporting the SLS program, a Space Launch Systems Program, which is basically the heavy lift program that's going to replace the shuttle, I like to say, shuttle program. And we are responsible right now is finishing up a lot of the ground system modifications that are taking place. Once they finish those up, we complete all of the test and checkout, make sure everything's working properly. And then as the OEMs start delivering hardware here, because all of the pieces that make up the SLS program and the Orion, they are being fabricated and tested in different locations. and they all come together at Kennedy Space Center, and we're the company that puts it all together, integrates the work, does mount and mate all of the hardware, test it out, get it out to the pad, and then eventually launch it.
So that involves the mobile launcher, the ML they call it, that's
Yes.
that's going to go out there with what you see here on the shuttle is not staying out at pad 39B. You're carrying it out there on the gantry is what I'm trying to say, and all that.
Yep.
And it was out there last year at this time for its first test run, and a major deal. And they're gonna roll it out there again from the VAB and hook everything up. They did the hydro test is what I'm trying to spit out, and all that stuff.
Yep.
And so you're involved with that, right?
Somewhat. I'm in the project management group. So our work is a little more focused on specific projects that feed into the bigger picture, if you will. Like, for instance, we have on the ML, there are a lot of, as we're finishing completing up all of the major mods, some of the smaller pieces of work that need to be completed end up falling out in what I call little projects. And we assign project managers who go out, they price the work. They ROM the work out, which is a random order of magnitude, which basically gives the customer, okay, this is approximately how much it's going to cost. It's going to take X number of engineers, technicians, quality, and then we lay a schedule out on what it takes to go do the work. We provide that schedule to our planning and scheduling and our ops groups, and they go and figure out how to implement, basically put that into a schedule so that it can meet the milestone in a timely manner.
So how's it going?
It's going good. It's going.
What can you tell the American people about how our space program, this Artemis, is going?
It's going well. It has its challenges, as with any program, as we were talking before. It's a humongous task, and I think once we get there, and like I said, we're scheduled to launch next year, late next year. I think it's going to be worth it when the American people see it leave the pad out there.
Well, we certainly can't wait for that. I like reminding people that, yeah, it's expensive to go to space and so forth like that, but of every dollar that the American public spends on taxes, a half a cent is what NASA's budget is. Yeah. It's about $20 billion. So when you pay your taxes, or you write the tax to the government, or you see it go out of your paycheck, a half a cent of every dollar goes to the space program. I think 20 cents of every dollar goes to the Defense Department.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean,
they have a huge
something like that, But so you got friends. You've had friends a long time that know you do this type of work. Yep. What do they feel about it? What questions they ask you? What's on their mind?
Well, when my dad was living, we had a lot of debates. I had to convince him that we were actually going into outer space. He kind of questioned that a few times.
Oh, really?
But I said, Dad, it's going. Trust me. So, but one of the things that I find a lot of my friends find it, just how amazing it is that you actually get to, especially the shuttle program, how amazing it was working on the shuttle program, how big of a deal it was. And Marty can tell you, after doing it for a while, you just kind of get used to it, as that's what I do. I get up, I go to work, I go, that day I may have to go into the shuttle cockpit, to go repair, write some disposition to go fix a seat, or go in there and change out a box or something. It just becomes just a daily routine. The shuttle is just like working at a garage.
Yeah.
The shuttle, that's just the car that you're working on that day. And but it's also an honor, when you sit back and think about that I've had a chance to work on the the human space program, and how small of a pool of people that it really is that have had that opportunity to do that. It's very humbling.
It is a small group of people, and I hadn't given a shout out to Marty Winkle, our cameraman behind the scenes there and co-producer of this, and you and Marty were friends working out there, and Marty, we're so grateful that you've gotten us to these space workers We've got a long list to bring you folks out there of some really cool people that have worked on all aspects of the shuttle and have transitioned into the new ARTEMIS program. So tell us a little bit about how your jobs getting into NASA prepared you for what you're doing today. And we're talking with Randall Clay here, who is a senior program manager on the ARTEMIS program. And so that we define kind of what you're doing today and how cool that is. Did you think you'd be doing cool stuff like this when you came in a couple decades ago? How did those other jobs prepare you for this moment?
Well, I tell you, this was my first, coming into the aerospace program was my first real job out of college, other than little part-time jobs. So I came in, I think I was 21 when I started. And
with which contractor?
I started with Lockheed Martin.
Okay.
And I started as a software engineer.
Great company to work for.
Yep. Well, actually, it wasn't even Lockheed Martin. It was Lockheed at the time, Lockheed Space Operations Company. And matter of fact, Marty was one of the first guys I met over in Complex D. We started over there working together, doing application software. And I did that for a while, but I was jealous because I had some other friends that came down and they were in systems engineering and they had an opportunity to get out. They were going in and out of the orbiter and writing disposition and working on the orbiter and working, flight hardware. I was like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to work flight hardware. So I put my time in there in the software area and I went and talked to my boss and he said, well, if you want to do something different, if I can help you, let me know. So I started applying for some other positions. And interestingly enough, a gentleman, I don't know if you remember Rick Davion, the mechanisms group, which was mechanical systems engineering, and I had a computer engineering background. And he gave me I applied for the job, and he gave me a call. So I sat down for the interview, and he was basically, we got to talking about cars and working on cars and gapping spark plugs and changing brakes and things of that nature. And I'm sitting there, I'm talking about working on the shuttle. Why is he asking me about the cars? What I didn't realize was he was just trying to get a feel for my mechanical aptitude, to be able to do the work. Because basically what we were doing, as systems engineers, you had to learn a system, and basically a lot of guys knew that system like the back of their hand. You could call them in the middle of the night with a problem. They could tell you exactly what was wrong and how to go fix it. But what he was looking for to see if I had the aptitude to pick up on mechanical applications and mechanical type procedures. And so I didn't know how the interview went. And so about a week later, I get a call back and says, hey, you ready to go to work for me? I was like, whoa, okay. So I got the job, Then that's when the sweat starts. It's like, okay, now I've got this job and something that I really don't know a lot about. But what he explained to me, which was very interesting, he said that, you have an engineering degree, you have a degree. He said that tells me that you can learn, and we can teach you what we need you to do. And so that gave me a lot of confidence to go in and try something new. And when I got there, one of the things I can say, with starting all the different jobs that I've had around the space industry, people have always been there to help. If you had questions about something, if you apply yourself, they've always been there to give you a helping hand for anything that you had questions with or doubts with. So that's one of the things that I have always liked about working at the Space Center. And you meet a lot of friends and make a lot of friends over the years that you always go back and for different things throughout life that you can rely on for certain expertise. So that was good. I did that as a mechanical engineer. I got all my what we call stand boards, and that's basically like those consoles we're looking at right there. Your level 1 stand board allows you to work the highest level of operation in that group, the hazardous jobs, to be able to sit at the console doing doing launches and sit there, doing some of the landing operations as well. So that's kind of the apex of the systems engineering groups. So I achieved that particular certification, and so I did that for a number of years. And then I wanted to move and do something different. I started looking at going into management. So I went out and sought the advice of some of the guys that I had grown up with through the different different years I had been there. And so a gentleman by the name of Mark Nappy, I'm sure you remember Mark Nappy, he was in the group at one time, and we sat basically side by side, and he had promoted up to, basically he was like a director of systems engineering. And actually, I take that back. He was ground ops program manager. So he had escalated several rings up the ladder as far as managers go, management. So I went by and I talked with him. I talked with another gentleman who was there who was up the ladder pretty well by the name of Jim Wilder. And so I talked to both of those guys and asked for advice. So they got me plugged in to doing some extra duties. I didn't realize it was going to lead to extra duties, but they got me plugged into some other areas to get what they call the FaceTime, so people can see you and you can be out there and get a little bit more involved with what's going on around the company versus just in your one little technical area. Because when you move up into the management area, one of the things that they taught me, you got to be prepared to manage any process, any group. You won't necessarily be managing something that you're comfortable with, that you know about. And so that was part of that grooming to get there. And I got an opportunity to go into management as a first line manager of a group called Arbiter Engineering. So you've heard about the OPFs, or the Arbiter Processing.
Yes, I'm sitting beside one over here,
Okay.
an OPF. That's the shell taken off of it.
Okay.
The Orbital Processing Facility, OPF, again, a lot of acronyms, and is the garage. Is the garage where they're on there.
Yep.
Marty, zoom in a little bit. I'm going to turn this. We got a distracting video in the back that I want to turn that off a second there. But this shuttle, our shuttle display's going on, and I keep hearing it going on there, and I didn't want to overpower our conversation here. Right. So yeah, tell us about working in the OPFs. A very interesting place. We had an astronaut, Nicole Stott, via Zoom a couple months ago. Gosh, Marty and I have been doing this for 6 months now. And she talked about going in the OPF, and what a cool place to be. You'd be walking down because everything is so close to the orbiter that you're going down what you think's a hallway with a black ceiling, and you realize that's the orbiter's tiles up above you.
That is the bottom of the orbiter, yeah.
And so that just had to have been an interesting experience.
Yeah. Oh, it was, and so that's where I worked. I spent the majority of my time working in and out of there as an engineer. But when I became a manager, I actually became the manager of a group, and it's like a beehive of activities.
Oh yeah.
You had, I think, probably 30, 35 different engineering systems between mechanical, electrical, pneumatics, hypergauss, environmental control, life support, avionics. I mean, it's just a number of different mechanical systems, and you probably had, 50 jobs on the board in one day.
Wow.
And working 3 shifts, around the clock. So it was always something going on there. So the group that I was managing at that time was called Arbiter Engineers. So it was a liaison engineering group. So their primary goal was, and you can imagine working all these different jobs, when they ran into a problem on the shop floor, they would come to the guys in my group to try to get it resolved. Sometimes it could be a discrepancy with a drawing, or a discrepancy with a part number that was identified in the work instruction. Because at that time, we wrote out our work instructions. I mean, it was like a road map you could give to a 6th grader, and they could go work it pretty much. I mean, because we wrote out every part, every nut, every bolt. You had to manually sit there and type that into the work instruction. And it was a very arduous task to write up a procedure to go out and go work. So if you had because of we talked about configuration management a little earlier, because of configuration management and controls, everything had to be exactly right in order to make sure it was documented. Because when it went over to configuration management, if you had any part number or anything incorrect in there, and they picked up on it, and they would pick up on it, then that document would get flagged and it would come back. And you'd have to go verify that it was the right part was actually in there.
Yeah, we'll get a configuration management person in here one day. They're only logged into like a vendor list of 1 million vendors and so forth like this. But he's right. They match the pieces and parts and all the paperwork. And if something's not right, everything stops right there.
It stops.
I know. I knew somebody involved in that, and there was a lot of problems with the liquid oxygen and hydrogen connectors on the ML. And it was an issue about a couple years ago that they kept flagging the parts until they got it right. This person I knew was involved in that. Well, you did your job well because you become the lead of Orbiter OV-105, which all of you shuttle aficionados know is Endeavour,
That's
our
Endeavour.
last one.
Yeah.
So what a feather in your cap to be over that beautiful spaceship.
Yep. I became the lead there as when I was a systems engineer, and that was one of the other things that was kind of one of the things that you aspired to become was a lead of a vehicle. The gentleman that was there, very, very good engineer, very sharp guy from Purdue, by the name of Craig Clokey. I don't know if you remember Craig Clokey or not, but he was a very sharp guy. And he ended up promoting, he went to Johnson Space Center with United Space Alliance. And so the position became open, and I was selected to go and go do that. So that was a great opportunity. And I had a chance to go also when I was liaison systems engineer, Arbiter engineering liaison manager. I had the opportunity to go into what they called the Ground Operations Rotational Program, which was basically a 6-month rotational program that we had where it sent you got a chance to spend 6 months going around to all of under USA we had what they call elements. So we had the ground ops element, which was here in Florida. Then we had launch ops here in Florida. And then when we had the NSLD down there, the NASA Logistics Service Depot, which is where they refurbed and repaired a lot of the shuttle flight hardware and some of the ground systems hardware at that facility. That was the logistics element. And out in Houston at Johnson Space Center, we had several elements out there. So I got to end up in Huntsville, Alabama. We had an element up there as well. So you got an opportunity to spend basically 6 months rotating around to all of the different elements, experiencing and understanding what all they do. So and it's very interesting that some of the things that we did at that time as a company would just blow your mind. You had no idea that we had that vast kind of experience and depth where we did those different processes. When I completed that process, and one of the things about that program was to develop you for the next level. And when I completed that process, I was promoted to the next level up in management of a group called Environmental Systems and Propulsion. So that was basically the ECLSS, Life Support Systems, the ECS, Environmental Control Systems, and then the main engines and that propulsion piece of the shuttle. And so that was a wide array of systems that I had no technical experience with, if you will, because I came out of the mechanical side of the house. And so you get in there and you get your feet dirty, get your hands dirty, you get in there and you start working with your subject matter experts. And that's one of the things that as a manager you have to learn to really rely on are your subject matter experts. Because most of the time you will never be as smart as a lot of those systems guys who
so those are key employees that have they know one system as good as anybody can know it. And so and that is a big part of NASA's delegating the duties, right? That you I'm sure part of your management is learning to be a good delegator.
You have to learn to be a good delegator
and trust the people you're delegating to. Those the other side of the coin, right, Randall?
Well, you have to trust the people, and that's another thing too. You talk about trust and integrity. That's one of the things that they instill in you early on in the space program, especially in the shuttle program, because if you didn't have integrity and your word couldn't be trusted to go out and go do the right thing, it would bubble to the top very quickly. And one of the things that, as a systems engineer, things go wrong, and something could go wrong, and the only person that really knew it would be that systems engineer. And if you didn't have integrity, you know what, you wouldn't pick up that, what we call problem reports, or PRs, or IPRs, interim problem report, that would document that we went and ran this test, or we checked the gap, or did a measurement on something and it didn't fit within the right parameter. And you could be tired, it could be the middle of the night, and like, man, it's just something small, but it's not within the requirements, and you have to document it. And whether you did it right or you did it wrong, you had to have the integrity to document that discrepancy. And that's what, and I have no doubt that the majority, the 99.9% of the people out there had that same integrity to document and do the right thing when something went wrong.
Talking to some of the early Apollo guys, they said that this integrity you're talking about stems from the fact that if you did make a mistake, you had to admit it. You weren't going to be disciplined for the mistake. NASA's attitude was, what did we do in your training to set you up for this failure? What did we fail to train you to do that? And I've always found that's a really reassuring way to work, right? You know that you're not going to get, I mean, certainly you can mess up and bad things happen to you, but innocent mistakes or unknown variables that you explored into that went wrong, if you didn't fess up to it, no one was going to learn from it, correct?
Yeah. Well, and the other part of it is, I see the pictures of these astronaut crews around here. Their lives depended on you doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you have that kind of responsibility on your shoulders, it's a lot of weight, or it potentially can be, and making that decision shouldn't be hard to do the right thing.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about then you're outside NASA. You're very involved with the NAACP and your fraternity. We're going to talk about here in a minute. But before we get too far away from your NASA job, all of this discipline, I mean, what disciplines of life did this teach you that you're carrying out on a daily basis, that you're sharing with people you mentor? The NASA way is definitely an interesting way, as I've come to become friends with a lot of space workers. How do you perceive that your career is different from seeing an auto worker or even someone down the road working at Harris Corporation that's not under the KSC contractor umbrella?
Well, first of all, I believe, again, it's a huge honor to have had the opportunity to work in the space program. Like I say, it's a small alumni of folks, if you will. But also at the same time, the integrity and the discipline that you learn there. Before working in the space program, when I was younger, coming up in college, sometimes I'd run into a problem or an issue, and it's very easy just to say, you know what, I'm done with it. I'll take, I'll let somebody else do it, But as as I got in there and I started figuring out how to solve problems, how to, learning how to solve a problem in a textbook or in a classroom is one thing, but when you're sitting there in a real life example, applying, the schooling that you've learned, the real life experiences that you've had, it gives you a certain level of confidence, if you will, to be able to take on things that sometimes people would not take on. I find myself like mentoring like young folks. Again, like I said, I had a good bringing up, I believe, coming up, and I was always challenged at home, to figure things out. But when I got into the space program, again, that just built on what I learned at home and the confidence that my parents had instilled in me. And when I mentor young folks, I always try to, tell them, don't always go for the easier classes. One of the things when I talk to young folks that are in college, and they come up and they tell me they're majoring in some major, whatever it may be. First thing I said, what are you going to do with that? What's your plan? And when you can't tell me that you have a plan and what your career goals are with that, what you're majoring in, and that you need to go do some homework.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to think about it, you know, and
Good advice.
when I talk to younger folks, like in grade school and high school, you know, I sit them down with a piece of paper. I say, okay, tell me what kind of career, I mean, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? Now, again, being an aerospace worker, I didn't get rich by any stretch of the imagination. But
Not like Marty, huh?
Not like Marty, yeah.
Oh, okay.
but I haven't missed any meals either.
Okay.
You know,
good, yeah.
so it has afforded me a
Yes.
very comfortable life. And that's what I think a lot of young folks, they don't necessarily take that into consideration. They don't look that far down the road or stop long enough to kind of sit down and kind of put things on paper to kind of figure out, okay, you want to go drive this kind of car? Okay, well, this is what that costs. Mm-hmm. So this is what this is going to cost you roughly a month. You want this kind of house, or you want to live here, you want to do these kinds of things. So when you sit them down and you kind of walk them through some of the basics, and they get a chance to kind of sit back and think about it, because if you ask the average young person, you know, how much a job pays, they have no idea. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of start putting them in a perspective to be able to put things into context, mm-hmm. so that they can kind of help them figure out some of the things that they want to do and some of the decisions they want to make in life. So that's part of what I think being analytical and going through life and the kind of job that we have. And engineers, you know, we'll analyze something to death. Mm-hmm. You know, I get what other folks out of the business world and different things, and we're talking about, you know, maybe investing in something. And I'm still sitting there analyzing, and they've gone on, the investment club's gone on and made the purchase. I'm still crunching numbers. So you can't get into that analysis, but, you know, to paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
I've heard that term,
yeah,
right?
so that can be a downfall as well.
Well, what, man, you put it into such simple words, and you're so, you're motivating me because of the opportunities been presented to you. You've seized them. You've taken a lot of initiative. You show initiative, yep. and you'll get rewards from it, and you're living proof of that. Yeah. So you're involved with ARTEMIS. You know, we're saying maybe in 2024, 25, we're going to put boots on the moon. How confident are you that that's going to be happening?
I'm very confident. And again, you know, I'm there. I'm kind of in the midst of it, and you know, you have your good days, you have your not so good days. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is we have a mission, as Andy Allen says, and Bill Parsons. You know, those guys. You know, my bosses, they're Marines, and you know, mission. It's mission first.
Yeah.
You know,
Andy Allen's a Marine. He's a friend of our museum.
You got to figure it out.
He's the president of the.
Yep, he's
president of the.
Yep, he's president of the TOSC.
Of the TOSC contract. And we hope to have Andy here someday.
Yep.
He's a good friend of our museum and has done stuff for us. And he's a very busy man, obviously.
Yeah,
so,
he's busy.
Very
sharp guy. And all of the managers that, you know, my bosses that I work for, and all the way up to Andy and those guys, you know, they're I mean, you talk about a wealth of knowledge.
But they're accessible, right?
They're accessible,
I've
yes.
met Andy Allen, the astronaut, 3 times, I think, twice
Yes.
a commander, maybe 4 missions.
Yes.
I mean, a great guy to talk to and talk to you about anything on there.
And you know, when you talk about accessibility, you know, like I said, it's never been a time with working with those guys, or really anywhere I've worked in the space industry, if I had a problem that I couldn't resolve, you know, that I couldn't take it, you know, to my manager and get either some help with resolving it or elevating it, you know, as an issue. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like safety, I think you guys have heard other people talk about safety and the safety culture. You know, it's second to none, you know, as far as the space program, as far as the TOSC contract when I was United Space Alliance, and really the whole aerospace business out there at Kennedy, from my national customers, everybody takes safety extremely.
Every meeting starts with a safety tip. Am I correct?
Every meeting starts with a safety tip.
The manager says, "Hey, give me a tip for the day," or something like that, right?
Yep. You want to start a meeting out like that, and that kind of culture permeates over into your personal life.
Yeah.
You know, when and a lot of times outside those gates, a lot of people don't see it the same way. But if you were coming out there, and some of the processes and things that we do, I mean, are very, very hazardous. I mean, very hazardous. And you can't go into it, without taking the safety precautions and protocols serious, because it can create a very, very bad day for a bunch of folks. And I'm talking about the kind of hazards where you can lose lives. So you have to take it seriously.
With those hypergolic fuels and crazy stuff like that. Your friend Ellen Brown, who was here Tuesday, and we hope you see Ellen's, she was saying her safety consciousness at home is such that she'll see the neighbor mowing the yard in flip-flops, and she wants to go over and tell him, why don't you have closed-toed shoes on, type of thing. But yeah, you don't hurt your feet if you don't, if you don't have the proper PPE.
PPE, personal protective equipment.
Aha, an acronym I picked up from Marty wearing that scape suit he showed me in our room in there. Personal protective equipment, PPEs, yes.
I managed that process at one time as well too, hypergol systems.
Oh, really?
Which was, that was an interesting
That's some
assignment.
nasty stuff. Did you ever run into John Tribe, the Rockwell guy, the Apollo era hypergolics expert?
His name is all over the place, but I think he was a little out of that.
Yeah, you never worked with him. I just thought maybe on a social thing.
No,
he's another friend of our museum.
No, I've heard a lot of him.
50th anniversary.
Okay.
Well, it's great talking. You were talking to Randall Clay about the space program at Kennedy and the Space Center and the contractors out there that he's involved with, going back to the moon with the ARTEMIS program, we're not getting so close. There's going to be a green test of the whole SLS system where they're going to fire it all up.
Yeah, green run.
The green run. But pretty soon we'll be talking about who the astronauts are going to be, and I've already got my favorite is Jessica Meir to be the first woman on there. I think she's undergoing some training and so forth.
Okay.
She was up on the space station with Christina Cook. They did the spacewalks together in there. But we want to segue into how this NASA career, you've met some interesting people. You got a couple show and tell things there. You went to a black university. Okay. And I want to just ask you about being a man of color at the Space Center. I mean, it's not like the 60s or 70s, I'm sure. But have you found any trouble with that, to put it in a polite way? Any resistance?
I can't say that I've ran across any resistance that I haven't been able to overcome. One of the things that I can say, that there's always issues, but if you choose to focus on that and let that be the center of you not achieving something, then that's shame on you. So my parents raised me, and some of my mentors, especially when I was looking to go into management. My good friend Jim Wilder told me, he said, just be prepared. When the opportunity comes, your job is to be prepared to step into it. And so I took that to heart. So, and like I said, that's one of the things is being preparation, and getting when the opportunity comes. Like I said, if you're not prepared, you can sit back and talk about all the things you want, about what you would like to do, or why you're not getting a chance to do things. But then you have to kind of sit back and kind of look at yourself in that preparation. Again, I can't overemphasize that, because eventually the opportunity will come.
Yeah, I love how you're emphasizing that, and you strike me a man who's been ready for those opportunities, and too few people aren't mentored to be ready. Your time will come.
It will
Somebody's always got to step aside for whatever reasons, and if you're ready, it's like a sports team, right? And you're second string, and the quarterback had a quarterback change in Dallas there we didn't expect.
You're sitting over there with your.
I did pick Andy Dalton up on my fantasy team, by the way.
Okay. Hope
he's still got a little stuff left in him after Zeke went down in there. Randall is an active member of the Gamma Nu chapter of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, and you've held numerous positions in there. You've been involved with the NAACP.
So I got a piece of memorabilia for you.
Yeah, I wanted to show you that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and show that.
Okay. So I tried to find some things that I didn't have much, but this is back in the days when, as we say, when I used to do real work. That was at a shuttle landing at KSC, and one of the jobs that we had as a mechanical systems engineer, when the shuttles would land, we would go out on the runway, and we'd have to, take measurements so we could understand the tire performance. Because on the main gear, those flew only one time.
Oh.
The 4 main landing gear, they flew once. And so we would go out, we would take measurements on touchdown and how long the rollout was, and then on the nose gear, on the patterns there. Now the nose gear could fly up to 2 times if it passed inspection once it came back into the OPF. So that could save you a little time in the ground processing if they passed the inspection. But that was a big job. We would go out there and go do that. Every once in a while, we'd run across a snake out there that got hit on the runway, believe it or not.
Marty's done many marathon out there, I'm sure, haven't you, Marty, on the runway?
Not marathons, 5Ks.
Oh, 5Ks.
5Ks.
Yeah, 5K. And I've had the privilege of being out there one time on a family day, and I was surprised at the grooves. The whole runway is grooved, and it's also crowned.
Yep, it's
of
grooved.
Course.
And it's not little grooves. Those grooves are
those are deep
deep
grooves in that concrete.
Yeah.
It's concrete too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's concrete.
Not asphalt.
It's concrete. And the purpose of that is to make sure that the water runs off, so when it does land, you don't have any pooling or standing water there, because it could affect your performance on landing.
Well, here's some of our astronaut heroes, yours in particular there, that are part of the Gamma Nu, or the Omega Psi Phi. Is that am I saying that right?
Yeah, Omega Psi Phi. So Omega Psi Phi is one of the historically African American college fraternities. It was founded in 1911 at Howard University up in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But we have the distinction of having 3 active astronauts who flew on shuttles. And then we have the bottom here, Robert Lawrence. He was actually selected for the astronaut program, but he died in an accident out at Dryden White Sands before he actually began his class.
Yeah, that was in 1967 even, or earlier, maybe 60. No, he was a mole astronaut. I think he passed away in 64, 65.
I think it was, I don't remember the exact year, but it was in the mid-60s.
Yeah, Robert Lawrence. He just would have had a birthday, too. We do astronaut birthdays on there. And yes, he was one of the early astronauts, not the Mercury 7, but the second wave of astronauts chosen for Gemini, and some of them went to the manned orbiting laboratory like him.
Right.
And definitely would have been in the mix. So. That was so. Who else is there?
Okay, so you have Ron Mcnair.
Here you can point there.
Okay, you have Ron Mcnair, who was on Challenger, and he perished with that crew on the Challenger.
That was Ron's second flight.
That was the second. Okay.
And that was his he was in space before, and he had I think he had a saxophone with him. Wasn't he a sax player?
I think he was.
I think he was, and he was going to do a cassette tape up there that was going to be produced back here, and with some jazz stuff. So just a passing thing there.
Okay, and then we have Fred Gregory, who had a couple of missions. I don't know exactly how many missions he had.
He had a couple defense missions. He's a Marine, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom here we have General Charles Bolden, who was actually he was astronaut and NASA administrator. So
yes, during the Obama administration, that was our administrator. He had 4 flights.
Yep.
And he grew up in Columbia. I know he grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, because I've been to the museum there, and they had all kinds of Charlie Bolden stuff there, as well as a great museum in Columbia.
Okay.
And they had some of his stuff there, and a pretty decent moon rock and stuff from Charlie Duke, who grew up in Charlotte, in there. So, so have you met these astronauts before, or been at any of the functions?
I have had the honor to meet 2 of them, Mr. Gregory and General Bolden, and of course Mr. Mcnair. He passed away. Actually, I was in college. I remember the day that Challenger happened. That was my junior year in college.
All right, January 28th, 1986.
And that was in Texas, and it was so cold that morning.
Oh.
We were sitting there, in the dorm watching the launch, and we immediately, we had the sound to the TV turned down and had the music going that morning, getting ready to go to class, and we saw something happen, and everybody, man, what was that? We immediately stopped, turned the TV up to see what was going on, and unfortunately, it was the Challenger disaster, and that kind of, believe it or not, I think a little bit in my subconscious, that kind of inspired me to look a little bit more into the space program. Mm-hmm. And when I had the opportunity to go to work in the space program, I didn't hesitate. I jumped right on it. I'm
looking at my notes here that you came in with the Columbia accident in 2000.
No, I came in 1988, right after Challenger.
Yeah, you
STS 26R.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
So that inspired you. That's neat. Did you have anything to do with the Columbia, bringing home Columbia?
At that time, I was in a system engineering group. I was over the environmental and life support group, and we had a lot of challenges. We were doing a mod period on OV-103, which was what was OV-103?
OV-103 was Atlantis.
What was it? Discovery.
No, Discovery. Discovery's 103, Atlantis is 104.
Yeah, so we were doing a mod period there, and we had a lot of issues with cold plates. And cold plate manufacturer, and they were basically kind of getting out of the shuttle business, if you will, because it wasn't very lucrative enough for them. And the cold plates, and Marty, you probably remember some of these years, it's a very thin sheet that covers the top of it. That's what's used to keep the avionics cool in the crew modules. And so you have these big heavy avionic boxes that sit on top of these cold plates, and the water runs through them.
Electronics gets hot.
It gets hot.
A major problem.
Yeah, and so we had a big problem with getting scratches on them. And we, you imagine back in the early 2000s, we had these big maps, if you will. It was all kind of manual. We had these big maps, and you would manually mark a scratch on the cold plate. So when the QCs would go up to go inspect it, before they went and put a cold plate in, it was almost, I say aluminum foil, but just as easy as aluminum foil can be nicked and scratched, it seemed like you could scratch the surface of these cold plates. Huh. So we had a lot of issues with trying to get this bird put back together for a mission. So I was really focusing on that and trying to do some process improvements with my group at the time to try to get that ready to button that all up. But a lot of folks out of my group were deployed out to Texas and Louisiana, who went out and did the walk downs to go find the parts and debris out in the field, in the debris field. So
your emotions must have run high in July 2011 when Atlantis took off the pad for the last time in our 135th shuttle mission. Were you forward? Did you have an opportunity ahead of you after when the shuttle program ended?
Well, in 2000.
And how'd you feel about that?
Well, I was very emotional about it. But in 2008, we had our management at United Space Alliance. They had kind of started. Actually, I take that back. Probably 2007 or so, maybe even 2006ish. They started kind of preparing us that life as we knew it was going to be changing with the shuttle program, because they were starting then to phase the program out, and so and the replacing program hadn't quite been defined yet, and so Constellation was what came in, but it didn't last long because of some issues. But in that preparation, I took the opportunity to go back to grad school. I went back and worked on my MBA, and I got an MBA during that time at Miami, University of Miami, in preparation that, hey, life is changing. I got an opportunity to go back to school, and the great thing at that time, they paid almost 100% for it. So you just apply yourself,
right.
and you know, go and get your degree. And so that worked out really well. I ended up taking a job actually with Jacobs Engineering out in Houston at Johnson Space Center in 2008 in preparation of the shuttle program going down here. And my mindset there was, you know, that position came open, and I was actually looking at getting out of aerospace maybe. But then I thought, you know, Johnson Space Center, they were already working on the next phase of the program, you know, of the replacement program. And also they did a lot of payload support out there, and they also did astronaut training. So that particular center, and they were a design center, so they had a lot of things going on that would keep people gainfully employed, more so than Kennedy would, because we were basically a launch operations site. If you had nothing to launch, you really didn't have a lot of opportunities. So I had the opportunity to go out there for about 5 years. And then in 2013, you know, Jacobs is the prime on the TOSC contract.
Right.
And in 2013, Jacobs won the TOSC contract, and they were awarded. And I had the opportunity to come back and perform some work out here on the TOSC contract. So
you like Florida over you're native Texas, huh?
I'm a native Texan. It was tough leaving Florida, going to Texas, and then it wasn't quite as tough leaving Texas coming back to Florida.
Okay. Well,
But I love both places, and but I think Florida has become my official home now.
well, it's been a delight having this conversation with you, Randall, and some great incentive, and hopefully there's some young people out there, or you older folks, have your kids or grandkids watch this conversation with Randall Clay here, because I'm inspired. Wish I was younger to jump back on the train there. But what a message of being aware of the opportunities and being with a great organization like NASA, taking advantage of those opportunities, because they'll come there, right?
Yeah, they will come.
Right.
Just be ready.
Is there something I've asked you that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about?
No, I think you covered it. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my life with everyone.
Well, we enjoyed it. What do you think of our museum? The first time you've been in this
It's great. It's great.
situation here? And
it
were you surprised to see how much we pack in this small place, huh?
There is a lot here, a lot to see. If people are in the area or coming to the area, it's definitely worth coming by to check it out.
Well, we've been COVID safe, of course. We want you to have one of our COVID masks. That's brand new, of course.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Show that proudly, where
All
you
right.
have to mask up. And, of course, we've had this barrier here that makes us accessible in there. And we've really enjoyed having you with us, Randall. And
Okay, thank you.
Hope you don't be a stranger.
I will not.
Marty Winkles, bringing in all this great talent. And we're going to have more. In fact, every Tuesday and Thursday for the next coming, I think, 6 weeks, we've got workers booked. I'm not going to tell you who all they are right now, but you're going to enjoy each and every one of them. To end our program, I'm going to give you a little bit of some space history and what's happening. Marty, here's the launches that we have coming up. Of course, as Randall knows, all subject to change any launch, but looks like we're going to have Sunday morning at 8 something. The Falcon 9 is going to launch another batch of those Starlink satellites, and then they're going to do it again Wednesday at noon, 12:30 on Wednesday, another Starlink launch. But the biggie we've all been waiting for is the Delta Heavy, and that's now scheduled a week from Friday at 10 o'clock. It's a 4-hour window.
Okay.
And boy, they've had trouble getting that triple-barreled hydrogen-fueled Delta IV rocket off, but it's got a very important spy satellite that a little research I've done on it. It's a gigantic football field-sized antenna. So they can listen to our Stay Curious program while they're 100, 200 miles up in space. But interestingly, in space history today, Randall, the first Chinese astronaut was launched, a Takionaut they call him. And Yang Lui was their first spaceman 17 years ago, okay? And he's the last human to fly solo, by the way, because all the other missions of China, they had at least 2 and 3 people. China's launched since this man, about 8 missions and 2 women on different missions. They've gone to some small space stations, just 2 cylindrical space stations that have both been deorbited, called Tiangong. Interestingly enough, though, China has not launched a human in space. Coming up next week, 4 years. And we thought they'd be a little more ambitious about that. They bragged about going to the moon and building a space station, but they haven't had a human in space in 4 years. And also in space history, we'll leave you with this movie I'm showing you there, Woman on the Moon. This was a 1929 Fritz Lang movie that was one of the first true science fiction movies in 1929. Fritz Lang did Metropolis, known for a lot of other movies. But this was the first movie and the first time ever that they showed a countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. No one had even thought about that as a way to launch a rocket, and that was done in this rocket, in this movie, about a woman going to the moon to find the riches of minerals and so forth to bring back to Earth and so forth. So that's a little bit of space history today, and we're so glad that you've been with us today to help you stay curious. And we've had a great conversation with Randall Clay. Again, I thank you, Randall, for being here and sharing with what you have. A great inspiration to me and all of you out there, I hope. So, Marty, do we have any comments from, certainly some of his family and friends have been on there. And
Just want to thank you, well done. No questions.
all right, good. And with that, we thank Randall Clay for being here to help you all stay curious. I'm Mark Marquette. And Marty Winkle and I will be back with you tomorrow to bring you another edition of Stay Curious. Until then, we're happy that Randall was here today to help bridge the space between us. Y'all have a good evening.